name anybody, this guy is really special. And like I said, if he was an American, he'd probably be the number one pick in the draft going away.
The top prospect in the Milwaukee Brewers system is Jesus Mate. Here you go. We're helping you out with the name. And now we've got some information for you, too, as we hit a prospect profile. Scott Braun, along with Baseball America's J.J. Cooper and Geoff Pontes. So let's dive in, gentlemen. Geoff, Jesus Mate is the name that we might not hear in the big leagues anytime soon. But I do want to remind everyone how much of an impact Jackson Chourio made at such a young age in 2024. So do you have an ETA in mind? And what do you think about this prospect?
Yeah, I'm probably about as excited about Jesus Mate as I've been on any player coming stateside in the last 5 to 6 years. It's really was elite stuff in terms of what we saw last year in the DSL. I think it was a 169 WRC plus, 69% better than his competition. The underlying data is really good, and we'll probably chat about that in a little bit. But I'm thinking, we're probably looking minimum 2027, comes over this year, even if he sort of follows that Chourio path of jumping both A-ball levels and, skipping over the Arizona Complex League, which I think is totally reasonable and probably possible. Then it's AA, AAA the next year. Maybe he signs an extension and, we sort of see him in 2027. I would say that would be the earliest. That's probably still somewhat optimistic as this player, a year ago was just 16 years old and wouldn't be eligible for the draft as an American player until this year. So kind of puts into perspective just how young he is. But, I know JJ and I have discussed this player quite a bit. He was a hot name during our top 100 process. And, of course, our number one Brewers prospect in a pretty dang good system.
This is why we send someone to the Dominican Summer League and go to the All-Star game and all, is to see guys like Jesus Mate and to come back and say, man, everyone down there is raving about Jesus Mate. This is really kind of how you draw it up. Like when we talk about, it's hard not to compare him to Jackson Chourio, even though Chourio's an outfielder, although he was a shortstop as an amateur, but an outfielder, for the Brewers, whereas opposed to Mate should stay in the dirt. But the reason it's hard not to compare them is that this is that ceiling, that kind of potential impact where you look at Mate and say, okay, this is a player who really could have some pretty special bat-to-ball skills, power for his age, strike zone discipline, all these things that are usually kind of the things that you add as you mature, as you kind of get more at-bats. Mate already has a lot of those. Now, I don't want to go overboard on this. He's a teenager who's yet to play in the U.S., so this is not something where he's knocking on the door and goes to spring training going, I'm going to show those Brewers and find a spot in the big league lineup or anything like that. But it does kind of explain why he could be on a faster track than most, much like what we saw with Jackson Chourio, who skipped over, went straight to low A to Carolina, and then kind of showed he was too good for that league. So he kind of earned a Midwest League assignment, gets to AA the next year, turn around, he's in the big leagues before you know it. Barring injury, if he keeps it up like he's done so far, that's something that you could also see kind of that kind of track with Mate. But the other thing I would say with this is how the Brewers, this is one of the explanations for why and how the Brewers have kind of managed to stay at the top of the NL Central year after year, even though they don't really have a whole lot of financial advantages or market advantages over the Cardinals or the Cubs or some other teams in that division. But they've been really good on the international market. They've been really good at hitter development. They've been really good at pitcher development. And Geoff, I mean, you just put it all together. They're kind of rocking and rolling here as far as just year after year after year. This is putting him number one wasn't easy because this is a system that has a number of guys who are very plausible number one candidates.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we have a task that we do during our top 100 coverage. Go and check that stuff out on the site. But one of my favorite articles that we work on every year is who could be the number one prospect in 2026. And when I came into this and, was thinking about writing to this article, there was no other option for me. It was pretty much either Sebastian Walcott that I knew other guy was going to write about. But for me, it was Jesus Mate. And the reason that I say this, I think if you're going to put a player comp on this guy, it's probably like Ronald Acuna if you could stick in the infield. It's that sort of level of otherworldly skills. And there's probably even a case to be made that he's more advanced than Acuna was at this point. There was one player throughout the entire minor leagues. And I think this really showcases his dominance, that had this trio of numbers: a miss rate below 12%, a chase rate below 15%, and a 90th percentile exit velocity of 104 miles per hour, which, by the way, is major league average. He did this when he turned 17 a month prior to the start of the Dominican Summer League season. It's just so outlier, and I think it sort of showcases just how dominant he was. There was no player in the minor leagues that, from an underlying data perspective, was more dominant in 2024 against his average age of competition than Mate was. That includes Christian Campbell. That includes Roman Anthony. Name anybody. This guy is really special. And like I said, if he was an American, he'd probably be the number one pick in the draft going away and setting like bonus pool records. He would probably beat Charlie Condon and Chase Burns' numbers. It's just that outlier. We'll see how it translates when he comes over at first, but having looked at DSL data going back years, I've never seen anybody that approaches this, including guys like Junior Caminero.
Okay. Now I want to provide because we've got everyone very understandably heated up about Jesus Mate. So now, before we wrap this up, I want to kind of pour a little bit of cold water, just tamp it down a little bit. There's a reason he's not our number one prospect yet. Geoff, what would be a scenario where it's like, okay, because we know the DSL, the tricky part of the DSL, hitting the ball hard, not chasing, all these things are really good. But we also know that league is much more uneven, I would say, than like a US, like a full season league, especially. It's really hard to nitpick Jesus Mate right now. Maybe he's not a shortstop long term, but is there something, Geoff, that you look at and say, okay, this is what could slow him down other than injury? What could slow him down in 2025 as he continues his ascent up our rankings?
I think, just probably optimize batted ball contact when we're looking at how often is this guy going to put the ball in the air? How often is he going to hit the ball in the air to his pull side? Could get some bad batted ball luck. He does still hit the ball on the ground a fair amount. A lot of his hardest hit drives are still on the ground. Technically that leads to higher batting averages, but it could maybe call into question what the overall power upside is and put him more in like that 18 to 22 sort of upside range for home runs versus the 30 plus that we look at when we see a kid who's 16, 17 years old hitting balls as hard as the average major leaguer on a particular metric. So I would say that's probably the big one. The other one is, if the defense does continue to slide down and it's more of a question of, can he stick in the infield at second or third base? I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's really more of a question of, is he an everyday shortstop? Which, when you think about, there's only 30 of those jobs in the entire world. There is obviously a very high threshold you have to meet in terms of defensive ability to stick there. So I think those are the question marks. There aren't many guys that I go into every year where I'm like, 3 years from now, this guy's going to be a superstar. And I really do feel that in terms of my gut, but also my head when I look at sort of all the pieces of the puzzle and how it comes together.
My job is to take the glass half full, listen to that, and be like, did we just find the next superstar coming up to Major League Baseball who could be a Rookie of the Year a couple years from now and show us, what Jackson Chourio did, who will be a seasoned vet by that point. So it could be Jesus Mate, Jackson Chourio. And if you actually spell that out without knowing how to pronounce the name, it would be kind of interesting. So anyway, this is going to be very, very fun for Brewers fans if it pans out the way that they think it could. Okay. So obviously you need to stay locked on Baseball America coverage. Get yourself a Baseball America subscription so you can follow this storyline and either say, I knew about this a while back and expected this, or, you can get after us a couple years from now too. So thanks for watching this one. That's the top prospect right now in the Brewers organization. And we'll see you for more of these as we go team by team.